Well, as usual, welcome to this video, and I bid you a good afternoon. I had hoped that there would be those interested in talking about the exam, but since no one is here, we will just begin to speak about the next study that we are undertaking, and that would be virtue ethics. So, I am asking you to read this next chapter in Dr. Poeman's textbook, Virtue Theory, Chapter 9. Later, we will go through that chapter. It's actually a pretty good chapter. I'm also going to ask you to reread the section on natural law in the early part of Poeman chapter 3, because natural law, it's now time to discuss the full implications of natural law. Now, there are going to be at least two parts of this talk that we have with each other on virtue theory. First, I'm going to do just the 5,000-foot view, the simple view of what the two principal proponents of virtue theory are talking about, St. Thomas Aquinas and the Greek philosopher Aristotle. We're going to cover a little bit of Plato as well. Now, pertaining to the final days of our course, you know that you have the exam 2 that will be due soon. On 12/5, I will be sending out the final exam. So I'll send that out on 12/5. It will be about this lecture or the next lecture or so, and chapter 9 in the textbook. Goes out on 12/5. It will be due back on 12/13. That is a hard cutoff date because grades are due no later than 12/15. So if you don't have your final exam in by the 13th of December, you're not going to do well on the exam, on the course. All right, let's talk about the simple version of what Aristotle and Aquinas are up to. By the way, I'm going to send out copies of on Blackboard of this series of lectures. So you're going to have a physical copy of it at some point in the next day or so. So you can see, take a look at what I have written out here in person. So what we have in Aristotle and Aquinas is the proof of why some people, and not many, but some people are just plain good people. Now, I hope that each of you knows someone like that, someone who by their very nature is a good, faithful, and beautiful person. Maybe a grandparent, someone important in your life, I dare say, is such a person. Maybe you've had a favorite grandparent, a neighbor, maybe even a friend who is just simply by his or her very nature a good person. Now, oftentimes, these people are not well educated. They don't have to be, yet they are noble people. Some of the greatest individuals in history have been such people. As a matter of fact, most all religions have saints, and those sainted persons are these type of individuals. Sometimes they're simple peasant people. They're not university professors or famous. They're not well educated, yet they are noble. Now, Aristotle says that this establishes the case for morality being a thing, a true thing itself. Aristotle called these people great-souled persons. Psyche megale was the Greek word, the great soul, big-souled people. Aquinas, who follows Aristotle in this, says that we all have inclinationes is the word in Latin that Aristotle uses, and we'll define that in a moment. Inclinationes is the human perfection, the very definition of the human being. His or her arete, remember the word that we talked about, the Greek word for virtue, which really means more than our understanding of virtue, which has to do with proper behavior in some degree. Arete in Greek is excellence. Do you fulfill your concept? And inclinationes is Aquinas's Latin word for, we get our word inclination for that. I'll talk about that in a minute. Egeginus and syngeginus are the words that Aristotle uses. And again, we'll talk about those in a moment. Egeginus is the word that Aristotle uses that Thomas translates as inclinationes. So for Aristotle and Aquinas, we can come to know what acts are right intellectually, but only through inclinationes can we do what is right. Can we take our learning and apply it perfectly in our lives? So that we can know justice, prudence, moderation, and courage. We can come to understand those intellectually, but even if we understand them fully and their philosophical definitions, and we logically develop them, doesn't mean that we're actually going to do them. So one could know what it meant to be courageous. Remember, justice, prudence, moderation, courage, 4 cardinal virtues, sometimes called the Greek virtues. One could know what it means to be courageous and yet turn face in the moment of battle or when courage is called for and not actually do it. So for Aristotle and Aquinas, inclinationes is that thing, or egeginus is that thing which molds us into doing what is right. Now, our word intuition in English comes from intuitionis in Latin. But the Latin word has a sense of knowledge to it. And our English usage is closer to an unprovable idea. So those English definition of intuition and the Latin definition of intuitionis is a little bit different, even though the English word comes from that. So here I've suggested once again that you reread Poyman's section on natural law in the beginning part of chapter 3. And the reason we can now talk about natural law and not incorrectly talk about it the way Dr. Poyman was talking about it is the fact that we can now put it in the context of virtue where natural law belongs. Now, you can look at inclinationes as, I think, being synonymous or a translation of arete. But now keep in mind that arete is prime. It is the essential thing about moral theory. It lies underneath the rational. Now, philosophy is the thing that's brought to bear. We try to understand and explain this internal inclinaciones philosophically, and we can do that. We can do it in terms of knowledge and the science of this thing and the logic of it. But at the same time, that still doesn't mean that we're actually going to do it. Inclinaciones allows us to actually do that. So let me pull up this next page. As I've said before, through the use of logic, all of the philosophical techniques, logic, ontology, epistemology, they will provide us with a second tier analysis, a science of morality, if you will. That's Aquinas's term. But the fact remains that those who are noble people, these wonderful individuals that we speak of and remember well and recount the history of throughout the history of human thought, that these noble people are so because of inclinaciones, because of some internal drive and the perfection of their arete, actually living out their virtue. As I've said before, this inclinaciones, this arete, is the very definition of the good person. What does it mean to be a good person? It means to possess the inclination to virtue. Now that's significant. That really gives us a good overview of what Aquinas and Aristotle are up to. So these people, these simple, oftentimes simple people, don't have to be simple, you can be intelligent too, but not, you don't come to this through intelligence, through study, through science. You come through it by the inclination to be such. Now, to read more about this, and I hope that you will, because this is some of the most famous stuff in the history of human thought here. Aristotle's, I guess we could say his major work on ethics is the Nicomachean Ethics, named for his son, Nicaea. He's got another ethics, eudaimonia ethics, happiness, the key to happiness ethics, I guess we might say. Eudaimonia is the Greek word for happiness. But to read more about this description of the connatural or inclinaciones of Aristotle, read Nicomachean Ethics, Book 10, Chapter 5, or Section 5 of Book 10. And in that section, Aristotle proves logically, ontologically, epistemologically, that the virtuous person, the megalopsyche, is the rule and the measure of human actions. It's the very foundation, I guess we might say, the example of what we then begin to philosophize about through logic, ontology, epistemology, moral theory. All right, that's the bird's eye view. If you got to know anything, make sure you know that and think about that. All right, now I'm going to break this down deeper. This is important too, and I don't want to diminish the fact that it's important. But if you really want to understand what I'm talking about, this first part here is what you need to understand. All right. Now let's back up a little bit and begin with Plato. Remember, Plato was Aristotle's teacher. Socrates was Plato's teacher. Parmenides was Socrates' teacher, Protagoras to some degree. In order to fully unpack this from the standpoint of philosophy, I need to go a little bit into into Plato because he's foundational in many ways about this notion of arete. He sort of invents the term, or Socrates maybe, but of course, we only know about Socrates because of what Plato told us. All right, kind of going back to ground zero. In Greek, there are numerous words for love. We've got one. Greeks are very precise. So eros is the love of the body, sexual attraction, motivational love. So you love somebody, you want to be with them. Physical desires toward others. We get our word erotic from that. Now, philia is the Greek word for fellow feeling. If you feel empathy for someone, it is philia. Philadelphia comes from that word. Philia, fellow feeling, Delphia, brothers. A fellow feeling for our brothers and sisters. All right, storge, if you have a child, storge is your love and devotion to that child. Agape in ancient Greek was selfless love. Now, it developed in the 1st century AD from the original meaning that the Greek poets and Aristotle and Plato gave it to the love of God, godly love. In the New Testament, the love that agape is used exclusively of God or God-related. So it developed. The Koine Greek writers of the New Testament appropriated, I guess we might say, agape from the ancient Greeks and redefined it as godly love. Ludus, one of my favorite, playful love, the love of play. So your child running around in the backyard loves to do that. That love is ludus. Pragma, from which we get our word pragmatic, is the love of ends, having things turn out right. And philatia is love of self. Okay. Now, typically we find 3 types of love being talked about in the literature, and that's eros, philia, and agape. Now, normally we think of eros or erotic love as being a lower type of love. But Plato makes an unusual move in one of his early dialogues called the Symposium. And the question in the Symposium is, well, most of you know that I guess you know, I don't know that you know that, the Greeks were bisexual. They both male and female, there was a lot of love between females and females and males and males. And the question in the Symposium of Plato is, why is someone as ugly as Socrates the sexiest thing going? So they all come together and they get drunk and they talk about, they all give their poems to love. And the question is, why is Socrates so erotic? And the answer is strange, because Socrates was known as an ugly wart of a little guy. As a matter of fact, Aristophanes makes fun of him in The Frogs, I think it is. Maybe it's The Clouds, I can't remember. And while watching the play, the playwright is making fun of Socrates. Socrates was said to have run upon the stage and started profiling in front of all of the audience. Just one of those things that happened in Athens. Right. Now, what Plato is going after here is this move that Aristotle is going to develop into intuitiones, or St. Thomas is going to develop into intuitiones, and Aristotle is going to develop into egegenes and arete that we'll talk about in a minute. It has to be something which moves you to action. So normally we don't think about agape love or brotherly or sisterly love being something that moves you to action. So Plato needs to bring in this erotic motivation, I guess we might say. That was the whole purpose of the symposium, to say that this desire for doing the moral thing had to be a powerful movement within inside the individual to do the right thing, to overcome the tendency that one had not to do the right thing, to be cowardly, to be unjust, to be imprudent. Because we all know people who are beautiful, true people, and we also know jerks. So there's a powerful move, Plato says, to be a jerk. But there's also this powerful move, this inclination to be a good person. So this, he wants to go after eros here, because eros is motivational and powerful. You want to be with the one you love, and people will do a lot to do that. They'll leave their mother and father. They'll leave their homeland. They'll give up their right to the throne of England to be with somebody they love. So it needs to be motivational. And that's the reason that Plato, in the early dialogues at least, wants to have this eros being a sort of the motivational part of this. Now, this tendency to talk about motivation and action had begun early in the Crito. I think we read some, if I'm not mistaken, we read some excerpts from the Crito dialogue. Phaedrus, Plato tries to discover or uncover the compelling allegiance that Socrates has toward the good, toward the nomos. Here, I guess I ought to write that out in English letters. Nomos, N-O-M-A-S. Which can mean law or mind. I kind of translate it here as law mind, the mind of the law of the mind. That was the good was, the nomos was this motivational thing in the Crito. And in the Critias, another dialogue, it transforms into beauty. The motivational thing is beauty, the search for beauty. So it's sometimes described, the form is described as the good or the beautiful. But whatever it is, must be for Plato a motivating end, not just contemplative. It must motivate to action. It must make us do what is right. That's the reason it can't be something like agape, which is thinking, and to some extent so is Philos. All right, now that's Plato. Let's switch to Aristotle here. Let me say that sometimes I'm going to use intuitiones, the Latin. Sometimes I'm going to talk about connatural, which I think is the best English translation for intuitiones in St. Thomas. But in Aristotle, the word is ignis. That is what is in the individual. The intuition of the ignis is what makes your favorite person that you thought about in terms of just being inherently good. Ignis is in that, that's the thing, that's the connatural thing that makes that individual do what is right. Together, we want to develop syngenesis, syngenis, eggenesis and syngenesis. Now we got English derivatives from this: synonym, synergy, which means a close relationship. And connatural comes from con, which means inborn, and naturalis, connaturalis, con nature, together, together nature. Now, literally in Latin, naturalis was the hinge, like a gate hinge, which hung things together, right? Which made things come together. And egignis, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, being sort of the individual thing, the individual energy for the good. All right. So for Aristotle, it is an approbation, a certainty deeper than any knowledge, because it is the beginning of all rationality. It is the primal urge for rationality. And connaturalis in St. Thomas equals the understanding of love as above in Crito's dialogue. The motivational thing, the thing which makes us act toward goodness. Now, I don't know how well St. Thomas knew Aristotle. I doubt that he did know him that well, because the early translations of St. Thomas had just started of Aristotle had just started by the Turks, by the way, who had inherited Byzantine, remember, with the Greek province of Byzantine. So they came across these documents before anybody else did. Maybe he doesn't know the origin of love as it is in the Crito, but he adds to it Aristotle's understanding of connaturality or intuitionis. So what he's done here, either because he knew it or because he was just a blasted good thinker, I have no idea, probably the latter. He adds what Plato has done in terms of this motivational thing to what Aristotle has done in describing this as the primal beginning of thought and action. So he puts those together in his idea of connaturalis or connaturality. And that he understands as enervating to do the right thing. So it's that, those two things put together, that allows your good friend or the saint to do the right thing in face of impossible odds. I know we need to give examples about this. One of my favorite examples is Dr. King, who, in face of knowing, intuiting his impending death because he refused to give up on what was right and good. That's courage, my dear friends. Now, when I say goodness, Dr. King was flawed. Everybody knows that. We're all flawed. There's not one among us that doesn't have clay feet. Even saints have clay feet. Even saints oftentimes make mistakes because we're human. But there's still deep within inside us this urge to do the right thing, which is the very foundation, not just of ethics, but of thinking itself. The urge to comprehend the universe in terms of ontology and science, the urge to know in terms of epistemology, and the urge to do the right thing in terms of morality is this bedrock con naturalis that St. Thomas has really defined for us. So to go back for a minute to the symposium, it's not agape as one would expect from the historical development of the word. It's not philo, because no one really wants to be in Philadelphia, right? It's not eros, longing to be with the forms as one would long to be. It is eros. It is longing to be with the forms as one would long to be with the lover. That is what in St. Thomas and in Plato makes us do the right thing. So is it a metaphor or a reality? Yeah. Some people will say that it's a metaphor and laugh at those who think it is reality. I think it's probably both. Plato needs appetite for action, hence eros, hence evocative love, and it is that evocative love that Aquinas appropriates in his definition of con naturalis or intuitionis. Now, I've said here, and we'll just go over this again, I just put this here because this is not, in later dialogues, eros is replaced with the good or the beautiful. We talked about that above. Again, Plato is seeking the truth in evocative terms. He knows that it has to be evocative. It has to move us to action. Things that compel us, in this case, to what he considers correct judgment. Hence axiology. Remember, we've talked about that before. Axiology is judgment as it responds to beauty, whereas what we call ethics is judgment as it responds to the right act to do. Both of them concern judgment. The judgment has to have power. It can't be just an intellectual decision. It must be something which moves us or urges us to do the right thing. Now, I've said here, while Aristotle rejects much of Plato's ontology, he seems to keep this idea of correct judgment. Doing the right thing is a correct judgment. This is his sense of what the literature has determined as connatural. So it's a powerful thing that moves us. Here I've defined con naturalis again. Con is with, inside, inborn, naturalis, what's natural, a hinge. Um, Other philosophers now have talked about this. Descartes and Leibniz talk about it as innate ideas, but it's an intellectual thing in Descartes and Leibniz. It's not this enervating, active thing. So I've said here Aristotle uses agignus, and by the way, yeah, I forgot to mention that above. Agignus comes from we get our word egg from that. It's something that's born in. You know, the egg is born in the shell, so it's inside us, but yet it's got to come out, right? Everybody see that connection? It's beautiful. The egg image is good. I like it. Other times he describes it as syn genus. That's how it gets out to everybody else. So when it is inherent in the individual, then other people see that as a behavior, and then that excellent arete person then generates that in others as an example. So the great soul person begins this understanding of culture about what it means to do the right thing. So every time, my dear friends, every time we do the right thing, we make a point to the culture. Our egignus becomes syn genus, an example to others. That's the way that Dr. King is an example to many of you, as what is inherent in him becomes important to the culture. And that's what happens when we do the right thing, according to Aristotle. Syn is a kinship, synergy, where two things move together. Synonym, where one word is the same or akin to another. All right. Now, I think I'm going to go on here. I thought I would do this in two, but maybe it's better to go ahead and do it in one. I want to reiterate the cardinal virtues. You don't get out of any of my courses without knowing implicitly what the four cardinal virtues of the Greek virtues are: justice, prudence, moderation, and courage. Here's what St. Thomas wrote on the cardinal virtues. Now, this comes from the Summa Theologia. Here I've given you the excerpts from this. This is Secunda, the second part of the first Prima book. Question 56, section 56, question 3. I think I'm not going to read that. I'm going to, as I told you, send this out to you, but I expect you to read this. So this is something that you need to read and study on your own. St. Thomas on the cardinal virtues. This is on page 2 of 4 here. Okay. So let's go on to 3. This again is quoting St. Thomas here still. Then I say St. Thomas's thinking works in the same manner as Aristotle. The cardinal virtues are egignus in man and syn genus in humanity. They begin with the great soul person and they spread out as an example of this in humanity. That's the reason you remember these great people in your life. This is proof of that. Okay. Then I go on to talking about the form as it is in Aristotle, and you need to recall our discussion of the forms in Aristotle, Plato and Aristotle, as a matter of fact. Then here's, this is part 3 of 4, page 3 of 4, rather. So here's another thing that you need to read here. St. Thomas on the role of virtue in philosophy. So this is another thing for you to read here that St. Thomas wrote. And that goes on through the next page here. And that's it. I would say we're probably going to get together toward the end of the week, Thursday or Friday, to again offer you, when I send out the Zoom call, to offer you a discussion on how your papers are going. I assume, since no one's on here, that you're doing great, and I'm going to really look forward to reading some significant wisdom. So I'll send out another invitation, maybe Thursday or Friday, for Friday or Saturday. So if you've got any questions at all about the paper or about the upcoming final exam, then we can talk about that then. And we may, if you have questions about what we've talked about here, and hopefully you've seen and read by this, by the time we get together the next time, then we can do that. Later on, maybe Monday of next week, we're going to have a get together on chapter 9. We're going to read chapter 9 together, or look over chapter 9 to find out what's important. So stay tuned for that as well. That'll come out later after the next check-in on the paper and the final exam. We will have a reading together of chapter 9. Okay. I hope all of you are doing well. I think about you every day and how courageous you are in terms of dealing with this this unpleasantness that we are heir to. So I hope you're doing well. Again, if you need to speak to me for any reason, please shoot me an email, and we will get together via Zoom. Again, thanks for listening to this, and I hope to see you soon. And I bid you good day.